The stars outside the colony station were endless, cold, and quiet. Every night she sat by the small glass window in her cabin, watching them. The stars did not laugh at her. They did not whisper about her. They only burned in silence. And in that silence she found both comfort and pain. Her name was Alara, a human woman living on the edge of known space. She worked in the water farms, checking pipes, cleaning filters, and repairing the old machines that kept the colony alive. It was not glorious work, but it was important. And yet, no one looked at her with pride. To most people, she was invisible, a shadow passing between brighter lights. Alara carried a secret that was not really a secret. Everyone in the colony knew she could not have children. It was the quiet curse of her body, something she had been told since she was young. And because of this, no man had ever chosen her. No family had ever welcomed her. In a place where survival depended on building strong families, strong bloodlines, she was seen as broken. When she walked through the corridors, she felt the weight of eyes, soft pity from some, silent rejection from most. She learned to lower her gaze, to keep her heart locked, to speak only when needed. Her days were filled with routine: wake up, eat alone, walk to the farms, check the humming machines, walk home. The machines always hissed and clanked in the same way. The hallways always echoed with the same footsteps. Life in the colony was a circle, and she walked it endlessly. But lately, she felt something was different. At night, when she sat by the window, she thought she could see movement beyond the stars. A shadow, a flicker, something that did not belong to the silence of space. And sometimes, in the corner of her vision, she thought she saw a figure watching her in the crowded corridors, tall still, with eyes that glowed faintly under the dim colony lights. But when she turned, there was no one there. Only empty hallways and closing doors. Alara told herself it was nothing. The mind played tricks when it was hungry for something. More still, the feeling grew, and the silence of the colony no longer felt empty. It felt watched. One evening, after her long shift, she walked home through the maintenance tunnels. The lights above flickered, some dead, some broken, leaving half the passage in shadow. Her boots echoed against the steel floor, her breath loud in her helmet, filter. Halfway through, she felt it again, that weight, that gaze pressing on her back. She stopped, listening. Silence. She took one more step. A second pair of footsteps answered, soft but clear. Her heart raced. Her hand moved to the small tool knife at her belt. Who's there? Her voice was steady, though her chest burned with fear. No answer, only the hum of the broken lights. She took another step. The echo followed. Her pulse quickened, sweat slid down her neck, and then silence again, as if whoever was there had stopped when she did. She turned sharply, knife raised. The tunnel was empty, shadows deep. Only the flickering light swayed across the walls. She swallowed hard, lowered her hand, and walked faster. But in her heart she knew she was not alone. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. For every sound, the hum of air filters, the creak of metal, the soft hiss of distant steam. And then, for a breath of time, she thought she heard something else. A whisper, a voice too low to understand. She closed her eyes tight and told herself it was only the machines, only the air. But deep down she knew the truth. Someone, or something, had found her. The next morning, the colony felt heavier than before. People walked past her as always, not noticing, not caring. Children laughed in the halls. Lovers held hands. Families shared meals. And she carried the memory of the footsteps, the whisper, the shadow in the stars. For the first time, her routine did not feel safe. The silence she had lived in for so long now felt like a trap. She tried to tell herself she was imagining it, that her loneliness had finally broken into madness. But when she looked out the window that night, she saw it again. Not a star, not a ship she recognized, but a dark shape moving slowly in the void, as if it waited, patient, silent, just for her. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. Her heart whispered words she could not stop. Something is coming. Something is watching. And her life, the life of silence, loneliness, and rejection, was about to change forever. The next day, Alara worked in the water farms as usual. Pipes hissed, valves groaned, steam rose in the narrow metal corridors. Her gloves were soaked, her face streaked with sweat. It was hard, dirty work, but she preferred it because machines did not whisper behind her back. Machines did not remind her that she was alone. But that morning, she felt it again, the weight of unseen eyes. Every time she turned her head, every time she checked the corners, she expected to see someone, and finally she did. He stood at the far end of the maintenance hall, silent, tall, broad-shouldered, still as stone. His uniform was darker than the others, patched with old scars of fire and dust, his face half hidden by shadow. But his eyes caught her breath. They glowed faintly, not bright, but alive with something she could not name. Alara froze, a wrench slipping from her hand, clanging on the metal floor. He did not move, not even a flinch. He only watched, steady, unblinking. For a moment, she thought she should run, call security, do anything but stand there. And yet she could not move. Then, as if pulled back into the silence, the stranger turned. He walked away without a word, boots echoing, fading into the tunnels. Ilara's chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. Her hands trembling. No one had looked at her like that before. Without pity, without rejection, but with something deeper. She did not know if it was comfort or danger. That night she dreamed of him. In her dream, the colony was burning, alarms screaming, people running. And in the smoke, he stood, waiting, his glowing eyes fixed on her. When she woke, her pillow was wet with sweat and her body shook. The following day she saw him again, this time in the mess hall among the crowd. He did not sit, did not eat. He only leaned against the wall, watching the people pass by, watching her. Others noticed him. 2 whispers rose in the air. That's him, the outsider, the soldier, the one who came from the war front. Some said he was dangerous, that his hands were red with blood. Others said he was not fully human, that machines had rebuilt him after the battles. Alara listened but said nothing, because deep down she felt the truth was something else, something no one wanted to say. The stranger began to appear more often, not always close, not always clear, but in the corner of her vision, at the far end of a hall or crossing the market street. And every time, his eyes found hers, steady, calm, as if he had been waiting. Only for her days passed and the feeling grew. Until one evening, when the corridor lights dimmed for power saving, she found herself face to face with him. No crowd, no machines, no escape. The air between them thick, heavy. "You," he said, his voice low but strong. It was the first time she had heard him speak. Her heart pounded so hard she thought he might hear it through the walls. "Yes," she whispered back, though she did not know why. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. His face came into the light now, lined, scarred, but not cruel. His eyes were not glowing metal as she feared. They were human eyes, tired, carrying weight, carrying memory, yet still, there was something in them, something different. "You are not like the others," he said. She blinked, words failing her. "I've seen you," he continued, "alone, always alone." Anger stirred in her chest, not at him, but at the truth. She wanted to push him away, to shout, but instead she asked, "Why are you watching me?" For a long moment he said nothing, then he answered, "Because I know what it means to be left behind." The word struck her deeper than any wound. She wanted to ask more, but heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. The stranger turned his head, sharply, his eyes narrowing. Without another word, he stepped back into the shadows, vanishing into the dark. When the guards passed by, Ilara stood frozen, still hearing his voice. That night she sat by the window again. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and tired. But behind her reflection, in the glass, she thought she saw him again. Not inside her room, but outside, far across the colony, walls standing under the stars, watching. Her hands shook, but she did not look away. For the first time in years, her heart felt something other than emptiness. It was fear. Yes, but also something else. A spark. Small, fragile but real. As if her life, silent and unwanted for so long, was being pulled into a story larger than herself. She whispered to the stars, to the glass, to herself, "Who are you?" But no answer came. Only the faint glow of distant lights. Ilara could not forget the stranger's words. "I know what it means to be left behind." They echoed in her mind through every quiet hour, through every hum of machines, through every lonely meal. For the first time she felt seen, and that scared her more than being invisible. The colony whispered louder now. People said his name was Kale, a soldier who came from the war zones at the edge of human space. They said he had lost everything, his family, his unit, even his home world. Others claimed worse, that he was a killer, that machines had rebuilt half his body, that he was more metal than flesh. Ilara listened but spoke nothing. Her eyes searched for him even when she told herself they should not. One evening, as the artificial lights dimmed to mimic night, Ilara took the long way home through the supply tunnels. She liked the silence there, the way the walls carried, her thoughts without the weight of human voices, but halfway through the silence broke. "Do you always walk alone?" a low voice asked from behind. Her breath caught. She turned, and there he was. Kale standing in the half-dark, his shadow stretching long across the floor. Ilara's hand gripped the strap of her tool bag tight. "Do you always appear out of nowhere?" she replied, her voice sharper than she intended. For a moment, his mouth curved as if he almost smiled, but it faded quickly. "I learned to move quietly," he said. "In war, sound means death." He stepped closer, slow, steady. Ilara's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stand firm. "Why are you watching me?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Kale stopped only a few paces away, his eyes heavy with memory. "Because you remind me of someone I lost," he said. The words struck her, deep and sudden. She wanted to ask who, but fear held her tongue. Instead, Kale continued, his voice low as if sharing something forbidden. "There was a world once. Green fields, open sky, families that laughed together. I had a wife there and a child. But the machines came. The war machines built to hunt us, and they burned everything." His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. "I fought, but I was too late. When the smoke cleared, I stood alone among the ruins." Ilara's throat tightened. She had always thought loneliness was her curse alone, but here was a man who carried it heavier than she could imagine. "Why come here?" she whispered. "Because the war still hunts me," he answered. "And because here, in this colony, I thought I could vanish into the crowd, but then I saw you." His eyes locked on hers. Empty eyes. A soul caged by silence. "I knew you understood." Ilara's chest burned. No one had ever spoken of her that way. Not cruel, not pitying, but as if she mattered. Still, fear gnawed at her. "People say you're not fully human," she said quietly. Kale's gaze did not waver. "They are not wrong," he replied. "When the machines wounded me, human doctors could not save me. It was battlefield surgery, half human hands, half stolen machine tech. I am alive, but not whole." He lifted his sleeve, showing a faint seam running down his arm, skin fused with metal beneath. The light caught the edge of it, cold and sharp. Ilara stepped back without meaning to. Kale saw, and for the first time, something like sorrow crossed his face. "I did not choose this," he said, his voice rough. "But I chose to survive." His hand lowered, the sleeve falling back. "I came here to live quietly, but quiet is a lie. The war is not finished, and the machines do not forget." A distant alarm wailed, soft but urgent, cutting through the heavy silence. Ilara and Kyle turned their heads, red lights flashing faintly along the corridor walls. "System breach," The speaker crackled. Outer sensors detect unidentified movement. Kyle's expression hardened. They've found me, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Alara's heart pounded. Who? He met her eyes, steady, calm despite the alarm. The same machines that took my world, he said. And now they've come here. Alara's knees felt weak. The colony was her whole life, her prison and her shelter both. If the machines attacked, none of them were ready. She looked at Kale, his scarred face, his half-hidden body of steel and flesh. He was not like anyone else here, and yet in that moment she knew. He might be the only one who could save them. Kyle took a step closer, lowering his voice though the alarms grew louder. You have a choice, he said. Stay with them. Pretend nothing has changed, and when the machines arrive you will die with them, or stand with me and maybe, just maybe, survive. Alara's breath shook. Her whole life had been silence, rejection, routines that meant nothing. Now the silence was breaking, replaced by danger and fire. She had always believed no one would ever want her, no one would ever see her as family. But this man, broken and scarred, was asking her to stand with him. Her hand tightened on her bag strap. Her voice came out low but steady. Show me the truth, she said. Kale's eyes glimmered, not with triumph, but with respect. And in that moment, Alara realized her life was no longer her own. The alarms continued to scream, red lights bathing them in shadow, and together they stepped into the unknown. The colony sirens screamed through every hallway. Red lights flashed across the ceilings, turning every face pale with fear. Doors slammed. Families rushed to gather children. Workers abandoned their posts. The calm routine of the station broke apart like thin glass. Alara stood frozen at the edge of the corridor, her chest heavy with panic. All her life she had lived in silence, but now the silence was gone, replaced with chaos. And beside her stood Kyle, calm, steady, his scarred face unshaken by the storm. They're coming, he said quietly, almost as if to himself. The machines never stop. They never forgive. They never forget. Alara looked at him, fear tightening her throat. You mean the ones who destroyed your world? Kale's eyes darkened. The same. Across the hall, guards shouted orders. Everyone to the inner shelters, move quickly. People grabbed their children, their bags, their hopes, and rushed toward the safety zones. No one looked at Alara. No one asked if she was coming. She was invisible to them as always, but Kale's gaze never left her. You cannot stay with them, he said. If the machines breach the walls, the shelters will be their first target. Her voice shook. Then what do I do? Kale's hand closed into a fist. You come with me, he said. You stand with me. Alara's heart raced. To follow him meant stepping away from everything she had known. But to stay meant hiding with people who had never wanted her. Her mind spun with fear and doubt, but her body remembered his words. I know what it means to be left behind. Why me? She asked, her voice almost breaking. Kale leaned closer, his voice steady. Because you are stronger than you know, and because family is not chosen by blood, it is chosen by fire. The floor beneath them shuddered. A deep boom echoed through the station walls. Dust rained from the ceiling, lights flickered. The first strike had landed. Screams erupted down the hall as families pushed harder into the shelters. Kale grabbed Alara's arm, not harsh but firm. Decide now, he said. Stay here and wait for the end, or trust me. Alara's eyes burned, her body trembled. Her whole life she had been told she was unwanted, weak, broken. But in Kale's voice there was no pity, only belief. And for the first time someone wanted her to stand, not hide. She swallowed hard, lifted her chin. I will come, she said. Kale gave a single nod, nothing more. But in that nod, there was respect. He pulled her down the corridor, away from the crowd, into the service tunnels, the dark veins of the colony where few dared to go. The tunnels groaned with the weight of the station above. Pipes dripped. Shadows stretched long under the emergency. Lights. Alara's boots pounded the floor as she tried to keep up with Kale's long strides. Her lungs burned, but fear pushed her forward. Behind them, The alarm screamed louder, and then another crash, closer this time. The sound of metal. Ripping, walls shaking, Ilara stumbled, but Kyle caught her arm, pulling her upright. "They're inside," he said, voice grim. "The machines are already here." Ilara's stomach knotted. She imagined tall shapes of steel, red eyes burning, blades where hands should be, the nightmare that had haunted. Kale's past now hunted them both. They reached a heavy door at the end of the tunnel. Kale entered a code on the panel, the lock hissing open. Inside was a small chamber filled with crates and weapons sealed in dust. Old, forgotten tools of war hidden beneath the colony's quiet life. "You knew this was here," Ilara whispered. Kyle nodded, pulling open a crate. "I prepared in case they ever found me." He handed her a small pulse rifle, light but cold in her hands. Ilara stared at it, shaking her head. "I don't know how to use this." "You will," Kyle said firmly. "You are not helpless, Ilara. Not anymore." She gripped the weapon, her palms slick with sweat. Every part of her wanted to throw it away, to hide. But another part, the part that had lived in silence, rejected, unseen, burned with anger. For once she wanted to matter. For once she wanted to stand. Kyle strapped a heavier rifle to his back, his movements quick, practiced. "You asked why I watch you," he said, not looking up. "Because I see the same fire in you that I once saw in my wife. The machines took her, but they will not take you." Ilara's breath caught, the weight of his words pressed deep into her chest. She had always believed she was nothing, but in his eyes, she was something worth protecting, worth fighting for. The walls shook again, louder, closer. A sharp metallic screech echoed through the tunnels, an inhuman sound that made her blood run cold. Kyle's head snapped toward the noise, his body tensing. "They've breached this level," he said. "They're coming for us." Ilara raised the rifle, her hands trembling but steady enough to hold it. Kyle glanced at her, and for the first time, he allowed a small, grim smile. "Then we fight," he said. The red light above flickered, shadows dancing across their faces, and together they stood side by side, waiting as the sound of the machines grew nearer. Ilara's life of silence was gone. Now came fire, now came choice, and she had chosen not to hide, but to fight. The tunnels shook as the sound of metal, claws scraped against steel. The noise was sharp, cold, unnatural. Machines moving closer. Ilara's breath quickened, her hands gripping the rifle so tight her knuckles turned white. Her whole body trembled, but she did not step back. Kyle stood beside her, tall and steady, his rifle ready. His face was calm, scarred but alive with focus. The first shadow appeared at the far end of the tunnel, a shape of steel, walking on limbs too long, too sharp. Its head turned, eyes glowing red in the darkness. Another shadow followed, then another. The air filled with the sound of grinding gears. The machines had found them. Ilara's throat tightened. "They're real," she whispered, her voice shaking. Kale's voice was steady, like stone. "They are always real." The first machine lunged forward, fast, faster than she expected. Kale fired. Blue light exploded from his rifle, slamming into the creature's chest. Sparks burst, metal screeched, but it kept coming. "Ilara!" Kyle shouted. She lifted her rifle, her hands shaking. She aimed at the glowing red eyes and pulled the trigger. The weapon hummed, light burst, and the machine's head snapped back. It fell, sparks raining from its skull. Ilara gasped, chest heaving. She had done it. She had stopped one, but there was no time to breathe. Two more machines charged forward, blades gleaming. Kale moved like a soldier, firing quick, sharp bursts. One machine staggered, metal tearing apart. But the other leapt high, claws raised to strike. "Ilara, down!" Kale roared. She dropped to the floor as the machine crashed against the wall, its blades slicing the air where she had stood. Kale slammed his shoulder into it, shoving it back. "Shoot it!" he shouted. Ilara scrambled to her knees, lifted. The rifle fired. The blast tore through its chest, the machine collapsing in a spray of sparks. Her heart thundered, fear and fire mixing inside her chest. She had never held a weapon before, never thought she could fight. But now she was fighting, surviving, standing, and Kyle was there beside her, moving like he had done this 1,000 times. Every shot he fired was precise, every step purposeful, but even Kyle could not stop them all. The tunnel roared with more screeches. Dozens of red eyes lit the dark. The machines were not just hunting. They were swarming. "Ilara, we cannot hold here," Kale said, reloading quickly. "We fall. Back to the reactor levels, the machines will choke in the heat." Ilara nodded, her throat dry. Together they moved, firing as they retreated. Sparks and smoke filled the air, metal bodies collapsing but more replacing them. Ilara's arms ached from the recoil, her ears rang from the blasts. But she kept going, step by step, shot by shot. A machine leapt from the ceiling, claws slicing. "Down!" Ilara screamed, firing blindly. The blast struck its shoulder, but it kept coming. Kale grabbed her arm, yanking her out of the way. The machine's claws tore through the floor where she had stood. Kale shoved his rifle against its chest and fired point-blank. The explosion threw them both to the ground. Ilara's head slammed against the steel, sparks dancing in her vision. But Kale pulled her up again, his grip firm. "Stay with me," he said. His voice was not soft, not gentle, but strong enough. To anchor her, they stumbled into a wider chamber. The coolant pipes of the reactor. Steam hissed from broken valves, heat shimmered in the air. The machines followed, their metal bodies screeching as they entered the rising heat. Kale lifted a heavy grenade from his belt. "This will slow them," he said. He pulled the pin, hurled it into the tunnel. The explosion roared, fire lighting the chamber, machines shattered, smoke filled the air. For a moment, silence. Ilara coughed, her lungs burning. Kyle leaned against a pipe, blood trickling down his arm where metal claws had cut him. "You're hurt," she said quickly. "It's nothing," Kyle replied, though his voice was tight. Ilara pressed a hand to his arm, the warmth of blood against her skin. He looked at her, and for a brief moment the war in his eyes softened. "You fought well," he said. Her chest tightened, not from fear, but from something new. No one had ever said that to her before, but the silence did not last. Through the smoke, more red eyes appeared, glowing, relentless. "They never stop," Kyle said grimly, raising his rifle again. Ilara raised hers too, her arms aching but her spirit steady. She was no longer the woman who only watched stars in silence. She was no longer invisible. Now she stood in fire, fighting beside the one person who saw her. And as the machines poured forward, she whispered under her breath, "I will not hide." The battle raged on. Steel clashed, sparks flew, smoke burned the air. Ilara's world of silence was gone forever. And in its place, something new was being born. Not blood, not children, not the family she once thought she had lost, but a bond forged in fire, a promise of survival. A beginning. The smoke hung heavy in the air. The chamber stank of burned metal and scorched wires. Broken machines lay scattered. Across the floor, sparks dripping from their ruined shells. Ilara leaned against a wall, chest heaving, her arms weak from the rifle's weight. Her ears still rang from the echoes of battle, but her heart was louder, alive with fire. Kyle limped across the chamber, his arm bloodied, his face shadowed with exhaustion. But his steps were steady, his eyes sharp. He checked the corridor behind them, then sealed the heavy hatch with a code. The metal door slammed shut, locking the machines out. For now, Ilara's hands shook as she lowered her weapon. Her whole body trembled with fear and disbelief. She had fought, she had killed machines, and she was still alive. The woman who once thought she was nothing had stood against monsters. Her silence had broken, replaced by fire. Kale sat heavily on a crate, pulling at the torn sleeve of his uniform. Blood smeared across his arm, the wound deep but not fatal. Ilara stepped closer, her voice uncertain. "Let me see." Kyle shook his head. "It's fine." But she knelt anyway, pulling the fabric back. The gash was ugly, carved by a machine's blade. She tore a strip from her sleeve and pressed it against the wound. Kyle hissed in pain but did not push her away. For a long moment, there was only silence. The hum of the reactor pipes, the drip of coolant, their ragged breaths. Then Kyle spoke, his voice low. You were not afraid to fight. Alara let out a shaky laugh. I was terrified. But you fought anyway, he said, his gaze steady on her. That is courage. Her chest tightened. All her life, she had been told she was weak, unwanted, broken. But here, in the ruins of battle, this scarred soldier told her she was brave. Tears pricked her eyes, though she fought to hold them back. Why do you say things like that? She asked, her voice soft. Kale's eyes darkened. Because it is true. He leaned back, his head resting against the crate. The machines destroyed my family, Alara. I thought I would never feel it again. The bond of trust, the fire of standing together. But tonight, I saw it in you. His voice cracked, rough with memory. You remind me that family is not only blood, it is who fights beside you, who refuses to let go. Alara swallowed hard, her heart trembling. She had never been anyone's choice, never been anyone's family. But in Kale's words, she felt something shift inside her, something warm, fragile, but real. You mean me? She whispered. Kale nodded once, slow but certain. Yes, you. The silence stretched between them, heavy but alive. Alara pressed harder on his wound, her hand steady now. For the first time in her life, she did not feel invisible. For the first time, someone needed her, not for children, not for tradition, but for who she was. Minutes passed, the alarms outside fading into the distance. The colony was still under attack. But here in the chamber, time slowed. Alara's body ached, her eyes burned. But she did not want the moment to end. She wanted to stay in this fragile peace with this man who carried his own scars but still saw her. Kale finally pushed himself upright. We cannot stay, he said. They will find another way in. They always do. Alara nodded, though fear knotted her stomach again. But this time she did not feel small. She did not feel broken. She felt chosen. They moved together through the maintenance levels. The colony around them groaned with alarms and distant explosions. Families huddled in shelters. Guards shouted in panic. Alara saw the fear in their faces, the same fear she once carried every day, but when she walked beside Kale, rifle in hand, she felt different. People noticed her now, their eyes following, not with pity, but with surprise. The silent woman of the water farms was no longer just a shadow. She was part of something greater. As they passed through the chaos, a child cried out from the crowd. Alara stopped, instinct pulling her. A young boy clung to a broken wall, separated from his family, tears streaming down his face. Kyle glanced at her, but before he could speak, Alara rushed forward. She lifted the child into her arms, whispering softly, "You're safe, I've got you." The boy sobbed against her shoulder, but her voice calmed him. She carried him back to his family, who wept with relief. The mother clasped Ilara's hand, whispering, "Thank you." For the first time in her life, someone thanked her. Kale watched silently, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. When she returned to his side, he spoke. "You see now? Family is not something you are denied. It is something you create." Ilara's chest swelled with a feeling she could not name. Not just hope, not just strength. Something more. She looked at Kale, his scarred face, his tired eyes, his steady presence. And she realized that even in the fire of war, she had found what she had thought was lost forever. A place where she belonged. The machines were still out there. The danger was not over. But in that moment, Alara knew this truth. She was not alone anymore. She had a family, and together they would face whatever came. The battle for the colony raged through the night. Explosions shook the walls, smoke filled the air vents, and the cries of fear echoed through every corridor. But within that storm, Alara and Kale stood together, step by step, fighting, guiding, refusing to fall. When dawn finally came, if dawn could exist in space, it was only the dim return of normal lights across the station. The alarms went silent, leaving behind only the hum of broken systems and the faint crackle of fire. The machines had retreated, their metal bodies dragged back into the void. For now, the colony still stood. Ilara leaned against a wall, her body bruised, her arms aching from the rifle. Every muscle screamed with exhaustion. But inside, her spirit felt stronger than ever. She had fought, she had saved, she had lived. And in doing so, she had become someone new. Cale approached limping, his uniform torn, his face streaked with soot and blood. He carried himself with the weight of scars, both old and new. But his eyes, when they met hers, they carried something she had never seen before. Respect, trust, belonging. You survived, he said simply, his voice low but steady. Ilara let out a tired laugh. I thought I wouldn't. Cale nodded. That is what survival feels like. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Not the silence of loneliness, not the silence that once crushed her heart, but a silence filled with meaning, with unspoken words that did not need to be said. Around them, families reunited. Guards carried the wounded. Children cried into their parents' arms. Ilara watched, a strange ache in her chest. Once she had thought she would never belong among them, never be chosen, never be part of such moments. But now she understood. Family was not something denied to her. It was something she could claim, something she could build. Cale's voice broke the moment, soft but certain. I told you once, family is not only blood, it is who stands with you in the fire. His gaze held hers. And you stood with me? Ilara's throat tightened, her heart trembling. I thought I had nothing, she whispered. No children, no husband, no place. Cale stepped closer, his voice steady. You have more than nothing, Ilara. You have courage, you have strength, and now you have me. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. The words struck deeper than any wound. He was not offering pity. He was not offering duty. He was offering choice, a promise. You mean family? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cale nodded, his scarred face calm, his eyes unshaken. Yes. Family. Ilara's chest swelled with emotion, tears finally slipping down her cheeks, not of sorrow but of release. All the years of silence, rejection, invisibility. They crumbled in that moment, because here in the ruins of battle she had been chosen, not for what she could not give, but for who she was. Cale reached out, his hand rough, scarred, steady. She placed hers in his, trembling but certain. The colony around them still burned, the war was not over, but in that single touch, Ilara knew her life had changed forever. Together they walked through the wreckage. The people of the colony stared, some with awe, some with confusion. They had seen Ilara as nothing, but now they saw her as something new. A survivor, a fighter, a woman who had stood beside the soldier when others hid. The whispers spread quickly. The quiet one fought. She saved lives. She stood with him. Ilara lowered her gaze, not out of shame, but because she was not used to their eyes. But Cale's hand in hers grounded her, reminded her she no longer walked alone. Later, as the colony rebuilt, Ilara sat once more by the window of her cabin. The stars stretched endless outside, as they always had, but they no longer felt cold, no longer felt empty. Beside her sat Cale, silent, steady, his presence warm. Together, they watched the stars. Ilara pressed her hand to the glass, remembering the nights when she had whispered her fears into the void. The stars had never answered her then, but now she did not need their answer. Because she had found her own. Cale spoke softly, breaking the silence. The machines will come again. I know, she replied, her voice calm. And when they do? He asked. Ilara turned to him, her eyes steady. Then we fight together. Cale nodded, a faint smile crossing his scarred face. It was not joy, not peace, but something stronger. A promise. Ilara looked back at the stars, her reflection, shining faintly in the glass. Once she had thought she was nothing. But now she was not alone. She had found her place, her strength, her family, And in the cold, endless night of space, that was enough, because in the fire of battle, in the silence of loss, and in the promise of tomorrow, two broken souls had found each other, and together, they would never be alone again.